My dad asked. Are you really our child? As he looked at my report card. Growing up in a family of doctors, I always thought I was supposed to follow that same path. I worked hard in school, always keeping my grades up. But to my dad, a doctor himself, that wasn't enough. He would often say, if you're not at the national level, it doesn't count. Hearing that over and over, I started to hate the idea of becoming a doctor. My name is Mia, and both of my parents are doctors, as are most of my relatives. My older sister, Emma, is 5 years older than me and was always the golden child. Everyone expected her to become a doctor, and she did without any issues. I think it's impressive, but Emma always got everything she wanted, and even the smallest achievements were met with praise. I was constantly compared to her, and no matter what I did, I was never seen as good enough. Emma and I had a difficult relationship. She was already dealing with the pressures of medical school, and she would often take her frustrations out on me, calling me names and sometimes even getting physical. I never told anyone, knowing my parents wouldn't believe me. They were too absorbed in their own work to notice. I went to a college prep school, but honestly, I had no intention of going to college. After everything that had happened, I felt like I wasn't cut out for the academic life. So I left home. I found a part-time job at a hotel in a tourist area, and managed to save up enough money to get by for a while. When I graduated high school, I got a job at the hotel, but since I was still a minor, I needed my parents' consent. They signed the papers without a word, probably relieved that I was leaving, this failure of theirs. I didn't hear from them for 6 months, until my dad called right before New Year's. Come home for the celebration. The relatives are gathering, and you'll be the host, he said before hanging up. I thought I wouldn't be called back, especially since I had left home. But there I was, preparing for the same old routine. Every year, my family held a huge New Year's feast. And every year, I was the one who did everything: cleaning, cooking, setting up drinks, and hosting the relatives who stayed over. My mom would tell me what to do, and Emma would ignore me completely. It was always expected that I would take on the responsibilities. I couldn't figure out why it had to be me. But the guilt of not following the family's medical path kept me going. I always went along with it, thinking it was my duty. I figured I wouldn't have to stay long this time. I worked long hours at the hotel, and couldn't afford to take much time off. I planned to go back home for just a day, and then leave, using work as an excuse to cut the visit short. But when I arrived, my dad immediately started yelling. You're late. Why didn't you come back yesterday? He snapped. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. Stop making excuses. Hurry up and get ready. He didn't seem to care that I was working hard, or that I was tired. I entered the house, and there was no sense of comfort. The same routine as always: cleaning, cooking, and preparing drinks, just as my mom instructed. When the relatives arrived, I stayed in the background, out of the way as usual. It was easier that way. They would talk endlessly about the hospital, gossip about patients, and complain about their work. It was a space filled with negativity, and I started to resent the idea of becoming a doctor. It seemed like all they did was talk about people behind their backs. Emma, however, seemed to enjoy it. She would laugh along with the others, mocking doctors and patients while I quietly served drinks. One relative, Tom, came up to me with a smirk. So Mia, you couldn't become a doctor, huh? He said, and it made me feel disgusted. I wanted to tell him that I didn't fail to become a doctor. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be like them. People who couldn't seem to live without putting others down. But I kept those thoughts to myself. Arguing would be a waste of energy. As the night wore on, I couldn't wait to leave. The whole situation felt suffocating, and all I wanted was to get back to my life at the hotel. The next morning, my parents complained about the cleaning and who would entertain the relatives, but I didn't care anymore. I have to work early tomorrow, I said, not even bothering to change out of my clothes. I quickly grabbed my things and left. That was the extent of my interaction with my family every year. A single day spent in a house full of doctors, followed by a swift exit. I didn't find it enjoyable, but I thought it wouldn't hurt to show my face once a year. After all, they had paid for my prep school. Even though I had no intention of going to college, it was the least I could do. 7 years have passed since that time. I'm now 25, and I still visit home once a year. Every year it's the same. This year the phone rang, and I assumed it was my dad. But when I looked at the screen, I saw an unexpected name, Emma. I rarely get calls from her, so I was worried something might have happened to my parents. I answered the phone, only to hear Emma in an unusually upbeat mood. "Hey, do you know that young CEO at your work? The one who's been on TV a lot recently?" she asked excitedly. I was confused. "Yeah, he's opened a few new hotels, so he's been on TV more." Emma laughed. "Introduce me to him. I saw him on TV, and I'm in love with him. He's a young master, right? He'd be perfect for me." I was speechless. I couldn't believe she was calling me for this. What did she mean by perfect for me? Gentle Jack, always the one to look down on others, and Emma, with her shallow pride. There was no way they'd be a match. But as I tried to process everything, Emma continued. "Oh, I get it. A lowly worker like you wouldn't know when the CEO is coming to your hotel. Maybe you've never even met him. Even if you have, a plain woman like you wouldn't stick in his memory," she said. I stayed quiet, but she didn't stop. "I bet you know when he's coming. I'll stay at the hotel that day. If I meet him in person, he'll fall for me. There's no way he won't. So make a reservation for me and let me know. And of course, since I'm doing you a favor, you'll have to cover the cost of my stay." I didn't know what to say. Was she really asking me for this? I had never imagined Emma would be so desperate for a man's attention, especially someone so out of her league. But then again, this was Emma, the one who always expected everything to fall into her lap. "Emma, aren't you already going through arranged meetings for marriage?" I finally asked, my voice thick with disbelief. I had always known that my family followed a tradition, marriage by 30, with carefully arranged meetings. I thought Emma had already started that process, but when she called me out of the blue, it was clear she had something else on her mind. She wasn't talking about a marriage meeting. What she really wanted was for me to introduce her to Jack, the young CEO at my hotel. She'd seen him on TV, and was convinced that he was the perfect match for her. But I couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. After all, just the other day, I'd been introduced to a 35-year-old man, someone my family thought was a suitable match for me. But Emma wouldn't even consider someone like that. She always looked down on the people she was meant to meet for marriage. But no, I wasn't going to introduce her to Jack. I told her it was impossible and ended the call. A month later, New Year's Day arrived, and I went back home, planning on doing the usual: entertain the relatives, do the chores, and leave quickly. But this year things felt different. They were unusually critical of me. "Sarah, you work at a hotel, don't you? I can't believe you're okay with such a low-level job," Tom said, his voice dripping with judgment. Then my mom chimed in. "It's surprising that you can do a job that isn't as important as ours," she added, her words biting. Even my dad, always so critical, remarked, "I'm glad you left the house early. Now, I don't have to hear from the neighbors about what you're doing." I stood there, feeling the weight of their words. "I'm sorry I'm such an embarrassment," I said, though the pain of their disapproval hit me all at once. As I stood there, Emma laughed mockingly. "You don't have anything going for you, so you'll be alone forever, right? What are you going to do?" Her words snapped me out of my sadness, and I felt my anger rise. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Emma, you're 30, 5 years older than me. What will you do if you keep setting such high standards? You'll be left behind," I blurted out. Dad's face turned red with fury. "How dare you say that about Emma? Apologize now," he yelled. My parents had always sided with Emma, always treated her like the golden child. "If that's the case, I wish you two would stay a family of 3 forever," I muttered, ignoring their anger. Dad, his face twisted with rage, stormed over to me. "What's with that attitude? Who do you think raised you?" he shouted, his voice filled with disdain. Mom nodded in agreement, and the relatives, all too eager to join in, backed them up. I felt so fed up, and before I could even respond, Dad yelled, "A failure like you is a shame to our family. Get out now." His mocking tone cut through me, and I knew it was time to leave. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my things. "I won't be coming back here anymore after this year," I said quietly, making my way toward the door. But as I opened it, a luxury car was parked outside. My parents and Emma, hearing the sound of the car, rushed out. A man stepped out from the driver's seat. It was Jack, the CEO of my company, the very person Emma had asked me to introduce her to. Emma's eyes widened in shock. "You president?" she stuttered. Jack smiled and nodded, then walked toward the entrance. Emma's voice trembled as she asked, "Could it be the CEO?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Sorry to keep you waiting," I said to Jack. "I was just leaving." He grinned and said, "I thought it was about time, so I came to pick you up." His words left my parents and Emma stunned into silence. The relatives gathered around, their curiosity piqued. Dad stared at Jack, dumbfounded. Jack approached Dad and said, "I apologize for my late greeting," then turned to me and whispered, "He's my fiancé. We're getting married next month." The shock on Emma's face was priceless. "What?" she gasped, her voice filled with disbelief. I couldn't resist adding, "And I don't plan to invite you to the wedding. I have no attachment to this house, so I don't think I'll be coming back." With that, I turned to leave, ignoring the looks of confusion and anger from my family. Jack opened the passenger door for me, and I slid into the car, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. As we drove away, I glanced at Jack, who had always supported me, even when I didn't feel like I deserved it. I'd met him after leaving home, and we'd grown close as he worked his way up to become the next president of the hotel company. He had fallen for me at first sight, and unlike my family, Jack appreciated me for who I was. I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. Jack had proposed to me 6 months ago, and his words about needing my support had resonated deeply with me. Since accepting his proposal, I'd been learning about business, and I realized that when I'm passionate about something, I don't mind studying. I had always hated studying for the sake of becoming a doctor, but when it was something I truly enjoyed, I wanted to learn more. As we continued driving, my dad's angry voice echoed in the distance. "Sarah, what's going on?" he yelled. I couldn't help but smile. "I'm no longer a daughter of this house. Goodbye," I said, waving them off. Months passed, and the new hotel opened successfully. I was there on site from day one, and the hotel was fully booked from the start. But then my parents showed up, demanding to see what I was doing, asking for a room. They were just as rude and entitled as always, but I was too busy to deal with them. Jack, who had always been protective of me, rushed over to deal with the situation, but my parents made a scene in the lobby. A security guard had to step in, and soon, a nurse named Brooke from my dad's hospital overheard the commotion and shared the story with her colleagues. The gossip spread quickly, causing my family even more embarrassment. It wasn't long before I heard that my mom had been forced into retirement due to a scandal at the hospital. Later, I learned that the hospital, already struggling financially, was forced to shut down after the rumors about my parents' corruption spread. My parents' house was sold in a desperate attempt to cover their debts, and I heard Emma's matchmaking attempts had failed too. I changed my phone number, so they couldn't contact me anymore, and I had no intention of ever reaching out. My life had taken a turn for the better. With Jack by my side, I was excited about the future. The hotel business was thriving, and next month, I would marry the man I loved. My career and personal life had never looked brighter.